Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Daredevil 2, cover dated June of 1964. The issue was written by Stan Lee, drawn by Joe Orlando, inked by Vince Colletta, and lettered by Sam Rosen. Our issue opens up with a striking splash page, teasing Daredevil's coming battle with the evil Electro. But before we can witness such an epic showdown, we must first travel to the offices of Nelson and Murdoch, New York's newest legal firm. There, we find Foggy Nelson, the young lawyer who, along with Matt Murdock, has already made a name for himself among the city's highest legal circles. Even still, Foggy couldn't have prepared himself for the arrival of a particularly famous client, the Thing of the Fantastic Four. The Thing's looking for legal help, as the Four are renewing the lease on their headquarters, the Baxter Building, and want a lawyer to check out the papers before they sign it. While Foggy's not an expert on leases, it just so happens that Matt is. So Foggy tells the Thing that he'll contact his partner, and see what he can do. The Thing takes this to mean that Matt will do it, so he tells Foggy to send him to their building while he and his teammates are away on a trip to Washington, D.C. To get past the building's security, the Thing grabs a photo of Matt, and tells Foggy that he'll feed it into a facial recognition system, so when Matt arrives, it'll know he's not an intruder and let him in. With that, the Thing climbs out of a nearby window, and climbs aboard the Fantasticar, which has been hovering outside this whole time. He and his teammates then head off for DC, as the issue shifts focus to Daredevil, the man without fear. He's just arrived at a dingy garage at the edge of town, where a bunch of crooks have been repainting stolen cars. Apparently word of his heroics have gotten around, as the crooks know exactly who he is. But they make the same mistake as countless others, as they decide their best move is to try to fight him. So they grab nearby mallets, crowbars, blowtorches, and rush in. But Daredevil's too quick for them, as he dances his way around their attacks, and pummels them with nothing but a dolly and a can of paint. But to their credit, the crooks are persistent. So to finally take them down, Daredevil starts hurling a bunch of stretchy tires, which act as makeshift straitjackets when they hit the crooks. But just as Daredevil finishes beating the last of them, he hears the sound of a massive truck barreling in from behind. Although he doesn't have time to dodge out of the way, Daredevil somehow has enough to grab a nearby engine, and use a spare tire to slingshot it into the truck. Thus the truck is totaled, and Daredevil makes quick work of its drivers. He then calls the police, but not before one of the crooks speaks up and warns him of what he's gotten himself into, as although they're just lowly crooks, their boss is none other than Electro, the electrifying supervillain that fought Spider-Man. But who is Electro really, and how did he become the evil master of electricity? Well, Electro was once just a normal electrician named Max Dillon. But one day, while on a high-tension repair job, he was struck by lightning. While it should have killed him, the strike somehow gave him the ability to control electricity. From there, Dillon's innate greed and selfishness led him to craft a costume and become Electro. But enough of his origin, let's shift focus to him in the present, as he's watching a news story from a secret hideout. It's about the Fantastic Four, and mentions how they're currently out of town. Electro, eager for a crime worthy of his great power, sees their absence as an opportunity to break into the Baxter Building, steal scientific secrets, and then sell them to hostile nations. So as he's hatching his evil plot, let's shift focus to Matt Murdock, who's changed into civilian clothes and made his way back to his office. There he learns of the Thing's visit, and the lease he's been tasked with looking over. Accepting the job, Matt decides to leave and check it out immediately. But Karen, his and Foggy's secretary, stops him on his way out. Apparently she knows of an eye doctor in her hometown, who specializes in an operation that can cure Matt of his blindness. She reads to him a letter he sent, but Matt's not that excited to hear about it. While being blind comes with many inconveniences, he fears that regaining his sight would cost him his other powers. You see, Matt was once a normal, sighted child. But one day, in an incredible act of heroism, he pushed an old man out of the way of a speeding truck. While he saved the man's life, radioactive material from the truck hit his eyes and blinded him. Yet it also enhanced the rest of his senses to superhuman levels, thus giving him the power to become Daredevil. So he simply tells Karen that he'll think it over, although he knows that he'd rather be blind and Daredevil than be a normal-sighted man. In any case, he then leaves for the Baxter Building, just as Electro arrives to rob it. But thanks to the villain's electrical tampering, none of its alarms are tripped as he breaks in through an unlocked window. While he begins rummaging through the Fantastic Four's stuff, Matt arrives and is automatically let past the first security gate. But when he gets to the second, he senses the danger that lies ahead. So he quickly changes into Daredevil, and then activates the building's automatic receptionist. It informs Electro of his presence, and although the villain doesn't know why he's there, he sees this as an opportunity to get his revenge. So he lets Daredevil through, and then begins manipulating the electricity within the Fantastic Four's mechanical equipment. Thus Daredevil walks into a trap, as one of the machines activates and begins engulfing him in a vibrating sphere of electrical energy. Thinking quickly, Daredevil hurls his cane into the machine and destroys it. Thus the sphere of energy dissipates, and he can face Electro head-on. But the villain prefers to battle from a distance, as he forces Daredevil to dodge an endless barrage of electric bolts. Knowing that he can't keep up this game forever, Daredevil lunges to a nearby light switch, and bathes the room in darkness. Now he has the advantage, as while he can sense his way around the room, Electro's as blind as a bat. But Daredevil's senses then deceive him, as he notices a nearby dumbbell resting on the floor. Thinking it's a good weapon to hurl at Electro, Daredevil tries to pick it up, not realizing that it belongs to the thing. In the few moments that he struggles to lift it, Electro illuminates the room with his body's innate electricity, and then strikes the hero with a searing bolt from behind. As Daredevil then struggles to recover, Electro strikes again, and knocks his head against the giant dumbbell. With Daredevil now unconscious, Electro could easily finish him off with a few more bolts. But in classic villain fashion, he instead decides to place him in the Fantastic Four's massive rocket, which he'll then launch on an eternal course to space. But Electro runs into a problem when the rocket's launch controls don't work. Unbeknownst to him, Mr. Fantastic had programmed the rocket so that it could only be launched by a member of the Fantastic Four. So after fiddling with the controls for a few minutes, Electro gives up and just blasts the rocket with a bolt of electricity. Somehow this overrides Mr. Fantastic's failsafe, and initiates the rocket's launch. Within a matter of seconds, the mighty craft reaches space, with Daredevil still inside. But the hero quickly regains consciousness, and wrestles his hands free of a restraining knot. It's then that he realizes he's in space, as he can hear the hum of the rocket's engine, and the force of weakened gravity. Remaining surprisingly calm, he searches the ship until he finds its control room, and then, without any piloting experience, he amazingly lands the rocket in Central Park. The feat is thanks to his enhanced senses, as he hears the controls moving, feels the power needed, and senses the direction of flight. But his landing draws the attention of the police, who naturally order him to surrender. Knowing that they'll just try to learn his real identity, Daredevil disobeys the order and hitches a ride on a nearby horse-drawn buggy. In fact, he just steals the horse, and uses it to escape to the Baxter building. A few minutes later, Karen's walking down the street and happens to spot Matt as he's passing by. She tries to yell for him, but he pretends as if he hasn't heard her, and keeps walking. She can tell that he's ignoring her, and worries that she may have offended him by bringing up the operation. But in truth, he's just eager to get to the New York heliport. You see, he'd retrieved his civilian clothes from the Baxter building and had obviously changed. But it's not like he could just waltz back into the Fantastic Four's headquarters. So his new plan is to hitch a ride on a helicopter, and then drop into the Baxter building from above. So he heads to the New York heliport, takes an elevator to its roof, changes back into Daredevil, and then hooks his cane onto a helicopter just as it's taking off. Familiar with the schedule of the sightseeing craft, Daredevil knows exactly when it'll be directly over the Baxter building. Thus, exactly 2 minutes and 50 seconds after takeoff, he unhooks his cane and crashes his way through the Baxter building's skylight. And his timing couldn't have been better, as Electro had just broken into Mr. Fantastic's vault, and stolen the scientific secrets within. But now that he's got what he wanted, Electro doesn't need to bother fighting Daredevil, he just needs to escape. So he runs to the building's empty elevator shaft, and then uses his electrical powers to glide down its cable. But even this doesn't slow Daredevil down, as he hooks his cane onto the cable and swings himself around, using the momentum of his lunge to safely carry him down the cable. With his enhanced hearing, Daredevil then tracks Electro's footsteps into the street. But the trail's lost when the villain electrically magnetizes himself to a passing car. Yet the man without fear can even sense electrical vibrations, and thus pursues him into a nearby theater. Inside, Electro immediately flees to the catwalk above the stage. Daredevil of course follows suit, but with so many panicked screams within the packed theater, he fails to hear the crackle of an incoming bolt. Thus he's hit square in the chest and knocked off the catwalk. While he avoids the fall by hooking his cane onto the guardrail, he knows that he's been defeated, as Electro can simply blast him again and make sure he falls this time. But in his arrogance, Electro decides to toy with Daredevil and simply leave him stranded and helpless. But what he doesn't realize is that Daredevil has sensed a line of electricity running beneath the catwalk. Recognizing that it must lead to the control panel of the theater's moving curtains, Daredevil sneakily presses his cane against the release button, causing the curtain to come crashing down on Electro. Before the villain can unentangle himself from the heavy fabric, the police arrive and douse him with heavy-duty water hoses. The water naturally short-circuits his body's electrical current and leaves him powerless. Thus he's been defeated, as Daredevil leaves the rest of the work to the police. But he's not done being a hero, as he heads back to the Fantastic Four's headquarters and repairs the vault that Electro had damaged when stealing the team's secrets. He then decides to finally look over the lease, but abandons it when he hears the Fantastic car landing on the roof. Thus the issue picks up with him as he arrives back at his office as Matt Murdock. But only moments after walking through the door, it suddenly comes crashing down. But don't fret, it's not Electro. It's the Thing and the Fantastic Four, who are there to receive Matt's report on their lease. And so the issue subsequently ends as Matt tries to explain that he doesn't have their report, but the Fantastic Four don't want to hear it, and just leave to find a lawyer who can work a bit faster. That concludes Daredevil 2, and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a fairly solid story, although nothing groundbreaking. I didn't like it as much as the first issue, but it was entertaining, and Electro was a good choice for Daredevil's first true supervillain. The cameo by the Fantastic Four was also fun, and for once didn't involve a misunderstanding that led to them fighting our hero. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue in the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.